I think I actually might love Star Wars more than I actually like Star Wars. And I know that sounds stupid, but I've been rewatching a lot of the movies lately, and I keep having this weird feeling where I'm like, man, I really love this universe. But some of these movies really suck. Like, I love the lightsabers. I love Darth Vader. I love the Millennium Falcon. I love this whole concept of Star Wars. Like the weird alien bars, the dirty spaceships, bounty hunters, crime syndicates, space monk wizard people fighting with laser swords. All that is sick. That will always be sick. But then when you actually sit down and watch some of it, you're kind of like, why does everybody talk like this? Like the writing for Anakin in the prequels, for example, is insane. And I don't even think that's Hayden Christensen's fault. Just some of the lines he has to say are just god awful. Like the whole sand meme, like you watch him and Padme and you're just supposed to buy this as one of the most important romances in the galaxy, but then half the time it feels like two aliens pretending to understand flirting. And then don't even get me started on Jar Jar or him stepping in poop or any of that shit. And then the sequels are just this whole other thing. Because by the end you're sitting there like, how the fuck is Palpatine back? Like seriously guys, it's so lazy. Like what are we actually doing? How does this universe that's like the coolest thing ever created keep getting trapped inside movies that are just kind of average or bad? And that's the weird thing with Star Wars. Like, I don't think people love Star Wars because every movie's amazing. I think they love Star Wars because the idea of Star Wars is amazing. It feels like there's a better version of it always living in your head that's bigger, dirtier, or stranger. A version where the galaxy keeps going after the camera turns off. And every once in a while, the movies actually kind of touch that version, you know? I feel like for me, like when they go in the cantina to find Han and Chewie for the first time, it touches that. Like Luke looking out in the twin suns, like it kind of captures that feeling. Like Vader walking through the hallway in Rogue One, like definitely touches it with just that horror and fear in that scene. Like that's the good stuff. That's what makes Star Wars feel like a world. But lately, or honestly, probably for a while now, I've been kind of checked out on Star Wars. I've just been kind of tapped out because it feels less like a world and more like a brand trying to remind you that it used to be a world. And I think I really felt that when I went to Disney World recently and walked through Galaxy's Edge for the first time, because that's kind of what put me on to the whole Star Wars vibe again. Because I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty fucking cool. Like, it was sick. Like, seeing all the ships in person and Kylo Ren walking around and the stormtroopers, like, that shit's cool. Seeing the Millennium Falcon in person, so sick. Like, I don't care who you are, that shit is so sick. Like, if that was around when I was a kid, my brain would have melted. I would have short circuited. But, I'm standing there looking at it as a 24-year-old adult, and then right next to me, there's like stroller traffic jam, and somebody's drinking $17 blue milk, and everybody's sweating through their Star Wars shirts. Like, it's Florida, 80 degrees out in May, and some guy's walking around like wearing his robe and shit that he just bought. And I had this weird thought, like, damn, this is really amazing. Like, this whole kind of world that they built in Disney World. So why does it feel like so dead to me? Like not literally dead. There are people everywhere and it's Disney World. It's basically human traffic with churros, but spiritually something fell off. I'm kind of the spiritual guy. Pick up on them perceptive cues. Like it felt like Star Wars, but it just never looked more real, but somehow felt less alive. Like I wasn't walking through the galaxy. I was just walking through the most expensive gift shop ever built where they just kept wanting me to buy shit. And that's what I kind of want to figure out is how did something like this imaginative and revolutionary become this managed? Because the original Star Wars was weird, right? Came out in the 70s and they had no idea how to even market the movie. And now it's so famous that we kind of forget how strange it actually is. Like, I imagine George Lucas pitching this movie like he's like, okay, this is about a farm boy who meets an old space wizard guy. They team up with a cowboy smuggler and a giant dog man to save a princess, learn about this magic religion, and fight robot samurai with asthma who works for space Nazis. Like, dude, what the actual fuck is that shit? That's insane. That is not normal. And anybody that was gonna fund that movie would be shitting bricks. Like, that sounds like a movie somebody would make today for $12 million and it would bomb And then 5 years later, everyone on Twitter would be like, actually, this movie was great and misunderstood. But somehow it became one of the biggest IPs ever made. And I think it worked because George Lucas actually took every cool thing he loved and threw it into like one giant blender. Like he got samurai, western, old adventure movies, World War II dogfights, mythology, religion, weird creatures, spaceships, princesses, monks, gangsters, robots, and he just kind of like threw it all into a big blender of soup, and it came all together to be Star Wars. And it's not perfect in the sense that every line's amazing, but I think it's perfect in the sense that this feeling is right, you know? The galaxy feels old, it feels dirty, it's spiritual and dangerous. It feels like you're only seeing one little piece of it. And that's what made it huge in your imagination. Like, I think something that they got right in the original movies is they don't over explain anything. You know, someone says the Clone Wars, and they're like, what the hell are the Clone Wars? But the movie just kind of keeps going and lets you kind of interpret what that means. You know, someone mentions the Kessel Run and Han's always flexing about it, and you don't get like some flashback or explanation of it. You just have to imagine it. You know, you see those bounty hunters standing around who barely say anything, and somehow that makes them even cooler. There are aliens in the cantina who are just kind of there, and they don't need to pull names and backstories and Disney Plus shows and Funko Pops to make this shit feel alive. They're just kind of like the background freaks in the bar that it feels like everybody knows except us, and that's what makes the world feel bigger. That's something that modern Star Wars, I think, really struggles with. It kind of can't leave stuff alone. Every mystery becomes lore, every cool line becomes a backstory, every background character becomes a possible show. You know, every helmet, dice, jacket, ship, weapon, hallway, and random alien eventually gets explained until the galaxy starts feeling less like a galaxy and more like a museum tour. Like on your left, you'll see the origin of Han Solo's last name. Please keep walking up and we'll explain the dice. And look, I know I'm part of the problem. I'm always part of the problem. Like, come on. I like the lore too. I'm the idiot asking like, wait, why is Darth Vader's suit painful? And what's the whole deal with the Falcon? Like the middle part's missing. You know, I'm talking about the Solo movie where Lando's ship and stuff. Like, so yeah, I get it. The lore is fun. But there's a difference between the lore making the movie feel bigger and the lore making the movie feel smaller, you know? Old Star Wars would mention something, and your brain would kind of just have to fill in the rest, you know? New Star Wars is kind of like, don't worry, bro. We'll show you the Kessel Run. We'll explain the dice. We're going to explain Han's name. We'll explain the ship, the jacket, and we'll explain why Chewbacca stands like that. And after a while, you're kind of like, well, maybe I didn't need to know all that. I think it was kind of cooler when it was a little bit mysterious, you know? And that's kind of my issue with the movie Solo, if you couldn't tell I was talking about that movie. Because honestly, I actually like that movie a lot more than I think most people do. And I know that movie got cooked when it came out, and I kind of get why. Nobody was really begging for a Han Solo origin story. Nobody was kind of sitting around like, you know what I really need? I need to know why Han got his last name. Like, nah, bro, they could have done so many other things, but I think the actual vibe of this movie, I actually kind of really like it. I think the crime syndicate stuff is cool. You know, the card game's cool. The train heist is cool. I thought Lando was pretty cool, and Kira was super interesting. And I love the scene where he, like, joins the Empire and he's, like, fighting in, like, some real war, you know, on some godforsaken planet. Like, that shit was cool. I want to see more of that side of the Star Wars to me. Like, Solo feels kind of more Star Wars to me than a lot of the prequels do, because it feels like this world that's lived in, where there's like all these criminals and smugglers, and the Empire is these super big bad guys that people are actually afraid of, you know? It's not like doing Jedi mind tricks on stormtroopers and we can just chop through them with our laser swords or whatever. It's like, nah, these guys are a threat. But then the movie also has this problem, though, where it's like checking off boxes off a list. Like, how did Han meet Chewie? How did Han get the Falcon? What was the Kessel Run? Where'd the dice come from? Why is his name Solo? And the name thing is like where I'm like, all right, man, come on. Like, we don't need to know that. Like, Han Solo was cooler when his name was just Han Solo. Not everything needs to be an origin story. And that's where Star Wars kind of went wrong with this one. The best Star Wars makes the galaxy feel bigger, while the worst Star Wars explains something that was already cooler in your imagination. And that's why Rogue One works so well, because Rogue One is technically explaining something too. You know, it's showing how they got the Death Star plans, but it doesn't feel like cheap backstory. It doesn't feel like, hey, remember that thing? Here's more content about that thing. It actually adds some weight to the story. It's not like, here's the origin of Princess Leia's haircut. It's more like, here are the people who died so the original movie could even happen. And that was actually really good. It made the world feel bigger. It felt like there were more people in the world than just like Jedi or Skywalkers or people with magic bloodlines or whatever. Like, nah, you're with the regular people this time. They're the soldiers, the spies, and the rebels, you know? They're the people that are scared and dirty and probably know they're not making it out of this thing. So when Darth Vader shows up at the end, he doesn't feel like kind of a cameo, like, hey, remember this guy? It feels kind of terrifying, you know? That hallway scene works because he's not there to be cute and be like, oh, look at, there he is. He's not there so the audience can clap and like, yo, I know that guy. He's like the horror villain, and that's the exact kind of Star Wars I like. Normal people dealing with the galaxy, and then the big mythic stuff kind of clashes with their lives. Because if every story was about the most important people in the galaxy all the time, the galaxy starts to feel small. And that's why I think Rogue One kind of works. It remembers that Darth Vader should feel scary. It remembers that the Empire should feel like an actual nightmare. It remembers that the rebellion isn't just like cool jackets and speeches. It's people getting vaporized for a cause they may never even see work. And that's what makes Star Wars feel real again. And that's kind of why like the prequels are so weird and they kind of don't feel like Star Wars, and I get why they got a lot of hate, but I grew up with the prequels, you know. I have a ton of nostalgia for them and I watched them a ton as a kid. You know, they came out well when I was really little, so they were still like relatively new when I was like a kid. But going back now and watching them, I'm like, episode 1 is so unbearably bad. I know people like love Darth Maul, and I think Darth Maul is sick, and like that end duel at the end is super cool, and you know the pod racing was kind of cool, but as a movie, dude, like Jar Jar is fucking terrible. The pacing's super weird. The politics are somehow boring and confusing at the same time. It feels like nothing happens in the movie until the very end. And it's just kind of like little Anakin at the end too just saves the day and blows up the whole ship. Like that's fucking ridiculous, bro. Like terrible movie, honestly. I can't stand it. It's so boring. But you know, I think episode 2 was a lot better. Like, it had some cooler stuff, but the romance dialogue is honestly atrocious, and I just gotta skip through that. Like, God, it's so bad. I think the ending is good, though. Like, when Anakin has to fight Count Dooku and Yoda pulls up, and it's the start of the Clone Wars on Geonosis, like, that's pretty sick. You know, you can start feeling it ramp up, like, okay, this kind of feels more like Star Wars. And then you get into episode 3 and you're like, damn, this shit's good. Like, that one has juice. Like, the opening scene's so memorable and awesome when they're, like, flying in the huge battle with the Separatists. And there's the General Grievous fight, you know, Order 66, Anakin finally turns. Like, that was a good fucking movie. And, you know, even though people say the prequels suck, I think they suck in a really interesting way because they're not lazy like the sequels are. George Lucas was like trying something. I can kind of see that, you know. He was trying to make Star Wars about Republic collapsing, the Jedi being too arrogant, democracy getting manipulated into fascism, forbidden attachment, prophecy, bureaucracy, blah, 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 blah. Like, and then it turns into the slow transformation of a good person into Darth Vader. And that's a huge swing he took. And I don't think all of it worked. Like, a lot of it is clunky as hell, and some of the dialogue sounds like aliens pretending to write human romance, but at least it had a vision, and I respect that more now, and I think that's why the prequels have aged so much better. Like, for years, the story was basically George Lucas ruined Star Wars, but then Disney buys Star Wars, and honestly, what lesson do you think they learned, you know? They're buying it after, like, the prequels came out and sucked, and they're probably like, don't let it be that weird again. Don't make it too strange. Don't make it too political. Don't let that one guy swing that hard. Give people what they recognize and keep it safe. You know, let's do Desert Planet, Millennium Falcon, bring back the old characters. We're going to restart the Empire, Death Star, but bigger and better. bring back the feeling that it gave people. And, I think everyone got mad because it felt way too safe, which is kind of hilarious, but also kind of sad because we punished Star Wars for being too weird and then complained when it became too managed. And I think that's the whole problem, man. Like, fans say they want risk, but they hate failure. And studios see that and they go, okay, no risk. Then fans go, well, why is everything so safe? And honestly, I'm not really above this either. I probably do the same thing. I'd be like, why doesn't anyone make anything weird anymore? But then I watch something actually weird. And I'm like, what the hell was that shit? So I get it. But that's the trap Star Wars is kind of stuck in, It got too big to fail in an interesting way. And when something can't fail in an interesting way, it starts succeeding into a boring way. And that's not even just a Star Wars problem. I think that's kind of the problem with anything now. That's a Marvel problem. Disney has that problem. Video games like Call of Duty and Battlefield, I think, have that problem. Certain music artists have that problem. YouTube has that problem. Anything that starts as a weird, cool thing that people love eventually gets big enough that the main goal becomes protecting the machine. At first, people ask, like, what would be cool? And then later they ask, like, okay, what won't piss everybody off? And that's how you get safe garbage. It's not always garbage, but it's always safe. And safe is kind of the enemy of Star Wars because Star Wars was never cool because it was safe. It was cool because it was weird. It had ugly little aliens playing instruments in a bar. It had a little green swamp goblin guy teaching religion backwards. And it had spaceships that kind of looked like they were made of trash. It had a villain who was basically a burned up man trapped in a painful robot suit, breathing through like a haunted vacuum cleaner. Like, this stuff does not make sense until your imagination made it make sense. And that's what I miss. I don't need Star Wars to explain every little thing. I don't need every mysterious character to come back. I don't need every gap in the timeline filled. I don't need another show where a character says something like, this connects to the Skywalkers or whatever. Like, I just want the galaxy to feel big again, man. I think we need more stories about random people, random planets, random bars, random soldiers or smugglers, random Jedi who are actually scary or mythical. I want some stories where the camera turns off and it feels like the world keeps going again. I think that's where the magic is, not like in lightsabers or the Millennium Falcon or Darth Vader. The magic is feeling like you're seeing a tiny piece of something massive. And when Star Wars over-explains itself, it kind of kills that feeling. Because the more they show you, the less you get to imagine. And that might be why I still love it, even when I'm cringing at half the movies. Because in my head, Star Wars is still huge. The best version of Star Wars is still there. But it's in the little moments, That's the good stuff. And that's why people keep coming back. Not because every movie is good, because they're not. People come back because Star Wars feels like it should be endless. But endless doesn't mean explain everything. Endless means you gotta leave some doors closed. You gotta let the world breathe, let stuff be weird, let something be a mystery without immediately turning it into content. Because once everything is content, nothing really feels special anymore. I don't think Star Wars is dead. It's kind of dramatic. Some kid is probably watching it right now and having the same feeling I had as a kid. So whatever, maybe I'm just old now and I'm unk. Maybe part of the magic is just always going to disappear when you grow up and realize how the trick works. But I do think Star Wars has a real problem. And it became so big that it started acting scared of itself. It's too scared to be weird, scared to leave stuff unexplained, and it's scared to move on. It's scared to not remind you of the thing you already liked. And that's how you end up with Star Wars everywhere, but somehow it doesn't always feel like Star Wars. It looks like Star Wars, it sounds like Star Wars, it references Star Wars, but sometimes it feels like a brand wearing a Star Wars costume. And that sucks because the universe is still awesome. That's so frustrating, the galaxy is one of the coolest playgrounds ever created, and they could do almost anything with it, and somehow it keeps coming back to the same people, the same imagery, the same nostalgia, the same safe movies. So yeah, I still love Star Wars, but I don't think I love it because it's perfect. I love it because every once in a while, it still reminds me of what it could be. It's a giant, dirty, weird, dangerous galaxy where anything can happen. It's not a museum or a checklist or a toy shelf with a plot. It's a world. And I think that's all we really want. We don't need it to be perfect because it never was. I just need it to stop acting like every mystery is a product waiting to happen. And I just want Star Wars to feel like a world again.
Wake up!